If you're watching this video on the day of its release, it is Pokemon Day in 2025, and that means the latest trailer for Pokemon Legends ZA has just dropped. So I thought to myself, what better way to celebrate than to revisit the Kalos region one more time. And so, in my revisit, I decided to use my favorite typing, the Ghost typing. But this isn't just a regular revisit. I'm going to be using the classic Hardcore Nuzlocke rules to see if my favorite typing has what it takes. Without further ado, let's begin the run. Like every normal Pokemon X and Y run, we wake up in our bed because of a stupid fledgling. And so, we get up, get dressed, meet our mom, and then meet our friends outside that are waiting for us. After being informed we're getting our first Pokemon, we head over to Aquacord Town so that we could pick our starters with all our friends. But first, of course I gotta pick my nickname. I mean, I'm D-Gangsta. But not only am I D-Gangsta on YouTube, I'm also D-Gangsta on Twitch, which you guys should follow in the link below. Anyways, shameless plugs aside, it's time to actually pick our starter. But you see, my cartridge is actually haunted and Chespin is replaced by a Honedge. This coincidentally works out great, and Honedge is the starter we pick. After this, as we walk back to our mom's house, Shauna decides to stop us for our very first Pokemon battle. And of course, in our first Pokemon battle, we lose. I told you, man, this cartridge is haunted. But on our second go around, Johnny the Honedge is able to take down Froakie and we're able to move on. Now that we've taken care of her, we head back to our mom's house to deliver a love letter from Professor Sycamore, and then we head over to Route 2 where Serena is teaching us how to catch a Pokemon. While this sequence plays out, I want to do one more shameless plug and ask you guys to please like and subscribe. I'm super close to 1,000 subscribers and I'd really love to hit it. Anyways, no more lame plugs, as it's time to head over to Santaloon City and pick out some new beanies. I chose this black one because honestly, it looks tough. Obviously, we're not just here for the beanie, and it's time to head over to the gym. Before we can enter though, we have to beat up this girl and steal her roller skates simply because I think they look really cool. But with those two little side quests out of the way, it's time to face off against Viola. Viola sends out Surskit while I send out Johnny. Turn 1, Surskit goes for a bubble, while Johnny sets up a swords dance. Next turn, Surskit goes for a water spout, while I go for a fury cutter. Surskit then lands another bubble that brings us down to about half, and the fury cutter then finishes off Surskit. Next for Viola is Vivian. On the first turn, Vivian goes for an infestation, while Johnny swings with another fury cutter. Vivian uses one more infestation that still does no damage, and a fury cutter is able to take down Vivian and win us the first gym badge. With that pretty easy battle out of the way, we head over to Lumiose City. From here we gotta go over to Professor Sycamore's lab, where we battle him, and he has the 3 Generation 1 starters. This battle goes the same way you think it does, where I set up 2 sword dances and then fury cutter everything else. Once we've handled business, it's time to head over to a cafe where we meet Lysander, who is trying to flirt with Diantha. I guess we must have gotten his way because he left very soon after we arrived. After this, on our way to the next city, we get challenged to a rival battle by Tierno. From here we head over to the next town, where we arrive in Chabanel Castle and learn about the history of Mega Evolution. However, once we leave this town, we run into a fat Snorlax on the bridge of Route 7 who is sleeping and won't get up. So now we gotta go get the Pokeflute. That involves getting this stupid Furfrou into this maze, which I'm not gonna lie, took me way too long to figure out. I haven't played this game in a bit, I'm sorry. And then we gotta watch some beautiful fireworks with Shauna, which for some reason has like some weird romantical tensions between us. I'm just saying, the Gen 6 devs were some gooners, cause tell me, why did we get Protect right after? After that Game Freak leak, I'm gonna be honest, I can never be too sure. Anyways, we get the Pokeflute and then we head over to the Snorlax, which I just run away from because I do not want that smoke. And then there's another double battle where Serena and I team up to face off against Tierno and Trevor. The fight goes pretty smoothly where I never get touched, and finally we're off to the next city. On the way, we find ourselves a new teammate that we can add to our party. On Route 8, we find a Drifloon who I catch and named Reed. When we arrive in the next town, we find a scientist who says Team Flare is messing with their boy, so Serena and I head over to Glittering Cave where we teach him a nice lesson. Once we save the scientist from Team Flare and get out of Glittering Cave, we can finally face Grant for the second gym badge. He leads with Amora while I lead with Johnny. Turn 1, Amora hits Johnny with an Aurora Beam that does about 30%, while I set up a Sword Stance. Another Aurora Beam brings Johnny down to about 30%, which means he eats his Oran Berry. In retaliation, Johnny lands a Shadow Claw that brings Amora down to 1 HP, and next turn Amora heals. Fortunately, when we land the Shadow Claw, we get a high roll and one-shot Amora. Lastly for Grant is his Tyrant, who lands a nasty crunch, leaving us on 1 HP. But since we survived, one Shadow Claw is all it takes to take down Tyrant and win us the second gym badge. On our way to Geosenge Town, we find a Gauntlet who we name Ben, and Reed evolves into a Drifblim thanks to the new level cap. When we arrive in Geosenge Town, we find a Team Flare member who is just frolicking in the fields for some reason, and then some crazy dog lady shows up with 2 Lucarios trying to challenge me to a battle. Reed and Ben just kind of smoke them, and we're able to move on. From here we head over to Reflection Cave, where we're able to find a Sableye to add to our party. I name him Peter, and then we're able to go on to the next city. Here we meet the Mega Evolution Guru, who makes us battle Serena in front of all of our friends. This is kind of messed up, as I just kind of beat her in front of everybody and basically embarrass her, but I guess it is what it is. Once that's taken care of, we're able to challenge the Shallower City Gym, where we find the crazy dog lady from earlier. She leads with a Mienfoo who physically cannot touch us, so I just set up 3 Swords Dances and then just one-shot the rest of her team with Aerial Aces. And once the final Pokemon goes down, we earn ourselves the 3rd gym badge. Once this battle's out of the way, we go up to the top of the Mega Evolution Tower, and we have a literal dog fight on the top of the tower. Once I beat her up, she gives me one of her dogs, and I'll gladly keep it so it could sit in my box. From here, we head over to Coumarine City, where we find Professor Sycamore trying to spit game at Diantha, and he gives us the TM for Fly. Then, after we take the monorail, Serena challenges to another battle right outside of the gym. Johnny just ends up beating her whole team 1v1. As a result of this battle, Johnny evolves and becomes a Doublade right before the next gym, but at the same time, he accidentally overlevels, so we won't be using Johnny for the same gym. Speaking of said gym, it's time to challenge it. Ramos leads with a Jumpluff while I lead with Reed. Turn 1 I go for a Protect on Acrobatics, and then turn 2 I take about 40% from an Acrobatics. Drifblim then flies up, and the next turn drops down, leaving Jumpluff on 1 HP. On the heal turn, I fly up again, and drop down one more time to leave Jumpluff on 1 HP again. This action repeats one more time, until finally I just take an Acrobatics and take out Jumpluff with a Gust. Next to come out is Weepinbell, who just gets outsped and one-shot by a Fly. Last for Ramos is Go-Go, who gets hit by a Gust, and then finished off by one more Fly. And with that, we earn ourselves the 4th gym badge. From here, we have to head over to the power plant because Team Flare is messing around in there. Once we get here, we beat up the 2 admins that are trying to control the power plant, and then restore order in the power plant, granting us access to the next gym. Speaking of which, we have to head back to Lumiose City, where we can fight Clement. He leads with Emolga, while I lead with Peter. Emolga's only attacking move that can hit me is Volt Switch, so I land a Rock Tomb to slow down whatever comes in next. The Pokemon that comes in next is Magneton. Magneton gets hit by the Rock Tomb and then gets slowed, and then I switch out to Ben on a Thunderbolt. Once Ben is in, he can just land a Bulldoze to take down Magneton, and next is Heliolisk. A Grass Knot from Heliolisk doesn't knock us out, and a Bulldoze is able to one-shot the Heliolisk. Last for Clement is Emolga, and I switch out to Johnny on an Aerial Ace. Then 2 turns later, Emolga finally drops to a Shadow Claw, and we win ourselves the 5th gym badge. From here we head over to a cafe in Lumiose City, where Professor Sycamore and Lysander are discussing dating tips. Once we're done talking to those 2 incels, then we head over to have a rival battle with Serena. It kinda just goes as usual, we kinda just destroy her, then we go over to a haunted house where a guy tells us a really spooky story. Since it's on theme with the challenge, I decide to give him a $1,000 tip because I'm just cool like that. After the haunted house, we find ourselves a haunter in the wild. I catch her and name her Sue, and using the power of the haunted cartridge, I evolve her into Gengar, and she'll get immediate usage in our upcoming gym battle against Valerie. Valerie leads with Mawile, while I lead with Sue, and on turn 1, I get to use one of my favorite Mega Pokemon in the form of Mega Gengar. Sue goes for Shadow Ball, which just one-shots the Mawile in a single hit. Next to come out is Mr. Mime, and she suffers the exact same fate and takes a Shadow Ball. Lastly for Valerie is her Sylveon, who takes one Shadow Ball and lives, but then hits us with that dollar store Dazzling Gleam. Sue shrugs it off and then finishes off the Sylveon with one last Shadow Ball. This means we defeat Valerie and win us the 6th gym badge. With the new level cap, we're able to evolve Ben into a Golurk, and Johnny learns Iron Head, which means I can evolve him into Aegislash. From here we gotta head over to the Pokeball factory as Team Flare is trying to occupy them and take defeat the Master Ball. Serena and I just kinda clear out the place, and we get a Master Ball as a reward. Once we get out of here, we're able to find a Litwick in the Lost Hotel. I catch her and name her Jean, and she quickly evolves into a Lampent. Also right outside on Route 18, we're able to find a Phantump. I catch him and name him Groot, and use some magic to turn him into a Trevenant. And lastly, using a Dust Stone, I evolve Jean into a Chandelure. From here, we head over to the Frost Cavern where we beat up some Team Flare members trying to bully an Abomasnow, and then we can head over to Anistar City. Once again, right outside of the gym, Serena tries to challenge us to a battle again, but then just loses horribly. Once that's taken care of, we can actually take on Olympia in the Anistar City gym. She leads with Sigilif while I lead with Sue. Sue Mega Evolves and instantly takes out Sigilif with a Shadow Ball, and next to come in is Slowking. A Shadow Ball just barely misses the KO and we nearly die to a Psychic. Fortunately, Sue holds on, and a couple turns later, after some heals, Sue finally takes down Slowking with a couple Shadow Balls. Last for Olympia is a Meowstic, but she just becomes a victim and eats another Shadow Ball. With Meowstic going down, Sue has won us the 7th gym badge. Right after this battle, we find out that Lysander is getting really angry, so we gotta head over to his secret lab over in Lumiose City. He challenges us to a battle that'll be much harder later on, and then we beat up his goons to get an elevator key and find out that he's keeping the Riz Master Guru in his basement. Once that's dealt with, he leaves us to fight one more goon who makes us choose one of 2 buttons, but it doesn't matter since both of them would blow up the earth anyways. From here, we gotta head back to Geosense Town where we find Lysander's true laboratory, and we have one more battle with him, which is still easier than his main battle. Once we deal with him, Serena and I team up and fight a bunch of goons on our way to the bottom layer, and once I get there, I have to fight another gauntlet of low-level thugs before Xerneas finally awakens. I instantly catch Xerneas with a Master Ball, and then we're thrusted into a battle against Lysander. Lysander leads with Mienshao while I lead with Sue. Sue Mega Evolves and then takes down Mienshao in a single Dazzling Gleam. Next for Lysander is his Pyroar, and then Sue goes for a Thunderbolt that does over 60%. Pyroar then lands a Fire Blast that deals just about 50%, and then one more Thunderbolt takes down Pyroar. Next is Honchkrow, who just goes down to a single Thunderbolt, and last but not least is the Gyarados. I switch out to Groot, and then Gyarados Mega Evolves and lands an Earthquake. I know Gyarados is going for Outrage, so I switch out to Johnny, who resists it, and while he's locked into Outrage, I do 2 Swords Dances, and finally finish off the battle with one last Sacred Sword. And with that, the ultimate weapon fires a blast that just destroys itself, and we have saved the world. Finally, we can get back to the real important stuff and start heading to the 8th gym. On the way there, Professor Sycamore stops us for a battle where he uses the 3 fully evolved Gen 1 starters to try and fight us, but all his Pokemon just get 1v1'd, and he gets embarrassed. Then, on Route 19, we have a gauntlet of trainer battles on a bridge. First up is Shauna, who sends out a Delcatty first while I send out Johnny. I set up Swords Dance, but she uses Charm, which cancels each other out, and a single Sacred Sword takes down Delcatty in a single hit. Next for Shauna is Gudra, but I switch out to Sue, and after taking a decent bit of damage from Dragon Pulses, we trade Dazzling Gleams and Dragon Pulses until Gudra goes down. Last is Greninja, but we outspeed and Thunderbolt just one-shots, which wins us the first battle. Next up is Tierno, who leads with Talonflame and I lead with Johnny. Fortunately, his Talonflame just doesn't have a fire move for some reason, so I stay in and set up a Swords Dance while he also sets up a Swords Dance. Next turn, Talonflame attacks with an Acrobatics, while I set up one more Swords Dance. On the third turn, Talonflame sets up another Swords Dance, but an Iron Head just takes him down in one hit. Next up is Crawdaunt, but that also just goes down to a single Sacred Sword. Last is Roserade, and Roserade goes down in a single hit to Iron Head. Last but not least is Trevor, who sends out a Raichu first. I lead with Johnny, but I quickly switch out to Ben because the Raichu can't hit them. Then Raichu switches out to Florges, and I click Curse thinking it's a good one, but it's actually the bad one that takes my HP. I then switch back out to Johnny, while Florges just wastes time setting up a Misty Terrain. An Iron Head takes down Florges, and next to come out is Aerodactyl. One Iron Head takes down Aerodactyl, and lastly is the Raichu. Once again, I switch out to Ben, and it's all but over once an Earthquake comes out and kills the Raichu. And with that, we defeat the gauntlet on the bridge. From here, we find Wulfric in the middle of the woods, and then we're able to challenge the 8th gym. Wulfric leads with Abomasnow, while I lead with Johnny. Turn 1, I set up a Swords Dance, while Abomasnow goes for an Ice Beam that does no damage. On the next turn, an Iron Head takes down Abomasnow, and next is Avalugg. I hit the Ice Table with another Iron Head, dead, and it quickly goes down as well. Last is Cryogonal that lands a Confuse Ray that for some reason goes through my King's Shield, and next turn Cryogonal sets up a hail while I of course hit myself. Next turn I switch out to Jean, who takes minimal damage on the switch in, and she takes down Cryogonal in 2 Flame Bursts, which finally wins us the 8th gym badge. From here we head to the entrance of Victory Road, beat up the Ace Trainer who's sitting in front of the gate, and finally gain access to Victory Road. And partway through Victory Road, Serena finally challenges us to one final rival battle. She leads with Meowstic while I lead with Sue. Turn 1, I Mega Evolve and use Shadow Ball to take down Meowstic in a single hit. Next to come out is her Delphox, and she meets the exact same fate, eating a Shadow Ball to the face. Next is Absol, who gets done dirty by a Dazzling Gleam, and next is Altaria, who gives up and doesn't even use an attacking move. Last up is Jolteon, who takes 1 Shadow Ball but doesn't deal nearly enough back and goes down the next turn. Unfortunately for Serena, we send her packing. But hey man, the world is cruel. With that final rival battle out of the way, it's time to make our final trek up to the Pokemon League. And now that we've finally arrived at the Elite Four, here's our final 6 that will hopefully carry us through and help us defeat Diantha. First up on our gauntlet is Malva and her fire types. She leads with Pyroar while I lead with Sue. Turn 1 I go ahead and Mega Evolve and then land a Thunderbolt that does just over half HP, while Pyroar goes for a Noble Roar that lowers my attack and special attack by 1 stage. Next to come in is Torkoal. A Shadow Ball does just over half, while Torkoal just wastes time going for a curse. Next turn a Shadow Ball takes down Torkoal, and next is Chandelure. She also just becomes a Shadow Ball victim, and last but not least is Talonflame. Talonflame barely lives a Thunderbolt, but then the recoil damage from a Flare Blitz just ends up knocking it out anyways and wins us the first battle of the Elite Four. Next up on the chopping block is Seabold and his water types. He leads with Clawitzer while I lead with Sue once again. Turn 1 I Mega Evolve and outspeed to land a Thunderbolt that just instantly one-shots Clawitzer, and next to come in is Gyarados. However, he just ends up meeting the exact same fate and goes down to a single Thunderbolt. Next up is Starmie, and they just end up eating a Shadow Ball to the face and going down in another single hit. Last up is Barbarical, but just like all its fallen allies, it too goes down in a single hit to a single Thunderbolt. Sue is certainly putting up a storm. Third up for the Elite Four is Wixstrom and his Steel types. He ends up leading with Klefki while I lead with Sue once again. A Shadow Ball leaves Klefki in the yellow, while Klefki lands a Flash Cannon that deals a decent bit of damage. Next turn Klefki gets a Priority Torment, while a Shadow Ball is able to take it out immediately after. Next up for Wixstrom is his Probopass, and here I switch out to Johnny on an incoming Flash Cannon. Johnny then goes for a Sacred Sword that brings Probopass down to a Sturdy, which I completely forgot existed, and as a result, Probopass lands an Earth Power that brings Johnny down to 1 HP. Wixstrom wastes 2 turns healing, and then finally Johnny's able to outspeed and one-shot Probopass at 1 HP. Next for Wixstrom is his Scizor, and I switch out to Groot on a Bullet Punch. Groot will not be that useful for any more battles coming up, so unfortunately it's time to say goodbye as I let him go down to a Night Slash. This means I can safely bring in Jean, and then one-shot Scizor with a 4x super effective Flame Burst. Last but not least is Wixstrom's Aegislash, and then Jean just outspeeds and brings Aegislash down to about half with a Flame Burst. Aegislash responds with a Shadow Claw that nearly kills Jean, but fortunately she survives and is able to land a Flame Burst next turn to finally end the battle. A little too close for comfort in my opinion. Last up in the Kalos Elite Four is Drasna and her Dragon types. Drasna leads with Dragougi while I lead with Ben. On turn 1, Ben outspeeds Dragougi and lands an Earthquake to take it down in 1 hit. Next to come in is Drasna's Altaria, so I swap out to Johnny. He takes minimal damage from a Dragon Pulse, and then I double out to Sue. Unfortunately, Altaria lands a Sing on Sue on the switch hit, so I gotta switch back into Johnny, while Altaria sets up a Cotton Guard. I set up 3 Swords Dances while Altaria attacks me, and then land an Iron Head that just barely misses the KO. Altaria then nearly takes us down with a Dragon Pulse, but fortunately we survive. Then after a couple healing turns, we're just able to take down Altaria, and next to come in is Noivern. I use King's Shield in order to raise my defenses as well as stall a turn, which then baits out Flamethrower. So I swap out to Jean on the Flamethrower, and next turn Noivern outspeeds and lands a strong Dragon Pulse. Jean responds with a Shadow Ball that does about 40%, and then I'm forced to switch out to Reed. Reed takes a Dragon Pulse that does about a third on the switch in, and then takes another one on the next turn that leaves him at about a third. A Shadow Ball from Reed leaves Noivern at about 20%, but it also lowers his special defense. Next turn, Drasna heals Noivern, while another Shadow Ball does about 60%. Finally, Reed's time has come, and I let him go down. This gives me a free switch into Ben, who takes a Dragon Pulse like a champ, and then finally finishes off Noivern with a Phantom Force. Last for Drasna is her Dredagon, who, after a couple turns of Phantom Forces, goes down. And with that, we earn ourselves a hard-fought Elite Four victory. And with that victory, we have finally earned the right to take on the Kalos Pokemon League champion, Diantha. Diantha leads with Hawlucha, while I lead with Aegislash. On the first 3 turns, I set up Swords Dances, while Hawlucha just kinda tickles me, and then one-shot him on the 4th turn with an Iron Head. Next to come in is Goodra, so I use King's Shield to raise my special defense, and this allows me to survive a Fire Blast next turn and retaliate with an Iron Head that takes down Goodra in a single hit. Next for Diantha is Tyrantrum, and just like before, I use King's Shield to go back into Shield stance, but this one matters less as we just outspeed and take the KO with an Iron Head. Next to come out is Gourgeist, and funnily enough, I completely forget the King's Shield and get taken down by a Shadow Sneak. But rest well, Johnny, you did insanely well. Next to come out for me is Sue, who swiftly gets her revenge by Mega Evolving and blowing up Gourgeist with a Shadow Ball. Next to come out for Diantha is Aurorus, and I decide to switch out to Ben. It takes 3 Heavy Slams to finally take down Aurorus, and last but certainly not least for Diantha is her Gardevoir. Gardevoir immediately Mega Evolves and then launches a Shadow Ball, taking down Ben. But Sue is quickly able to come in and launch one final Shadow Ball to avenge all her fallen allies and finally win us the challenge. And with that, we defeat Diantha and win us the Ghost Only Challenge. Please don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, especially if you want to see more stuff like this. Also, follow me on Twitch in the link below, as I will be playing Pokemon Legends ZA as soon as it comes out. Anyways, thank you for watching, bye bye.